Are we all sitting comfortably? Yes. Then I shall begin. I'm going to read a bit from Bad Moon. I'm well aware that for some people this is not an ideal choice of reading matter, so this is a comparatively benign chapter. Nobody gets their hearts ripped out. Not in this chapter, anyway. There will be moderate unease at the end, so that's my legal warning. Just to set the scene a little, Jones and Cage have set up their supernatural investigation agency, and they've been asked to check out Shotton Hall, scene of an infamous massacre back in the 19th century. I mean, you just know this isn't going to go well, don't you? And they are on their way to meet the owners of Shotton Hall now. Jones picked me up on the other side of the medieval bridge the next morning, and we set out. The day was lovely, and while I was somewhat apprehensive over the job, it would be nice to work on something that didn't involve the Sorensen Clinic. By the way, said Jones, apparently reading my mind, they're going to rename it the Sorensen Clinic, get rid of his name completely. He really won't like that, I said, trying not to smile. Yeah, we're just waiting for the right moment to tell him. It'll be interesting to see how he reacts to this massive blow to his vanity. Can they do that? After all, it is his clinic. Initially, yes, it was. Then we moved in. He was allowed to keep the private patient side as a cover while we took over the rest of it for our people. Now it all belongs to us. Bridgman's already been installed, so there's not a lot Sorensen can do, especially with this cloud hanging over him. The legal eagles will thrash out all the details, but the bottom line is that he's finished, and rightly so after everything he's done. I watched the scenery flash past while I thought about this. Is it my fault, do you think? He didn't pretend to misunderstand me, nor did he tell me that of course it wasn't my fault. Eventually, he said, I think things started to go wrong for him the minute he met you. He wanted you, and his efforts to acquire you caused him to cross the line. You'll blame me. You'll blame everyone but himself, Cage. Don't worry about it. He must hate me. I think he fears you, which is much better, trust me. The countryside sped past. I'd never been to this part of Rushfordshire before. The area was heavily farmed. Neat fields were surrounded by neat hedges. Gradually, the roads grew narrower, and the trees hung low over the lanes. Nearly there, said Jones. I can't believe you're not fast asleep and snoring your head off. You're not usually the world's most stimulating travelling companion, you know. It's the company I keep, I said. I always find it hard to stay awake when you're nearby. Hurtful, he said, changing down and turning left at what had been a narrow lane and had now degenerated into an overgrown track. We'd arrived at Shotton Hall. I caught fleeting glimpses of a building until we swept out from under the trees into a wide area thick with weeds. I suspected it had once been a very imposing carriage sweep. There was some kind of stone basin in the centre, almost invisible in the undergrowth. The remains of a fountain, perhaps. I tried not to remember that most of these bushy shrubs and trees would be descendants of those planted by George Shotton to save him from having to look at his dead daughter. Shotton Hall itself loomed over us, encased in overgrown trees. I could see oak and cedar in the distance, and closer to the house, alder, birch, and sycamore. Even on the brightest day, it would be dark inside. The house was much bigger than I thought it would be. Grade 2, said Jones briefly, with a Palladian front. Impressive, I said, still squinting up at the blind windows. Your architectural expertise, I mean. Did you study architecture? No, I googled Shotton Hall. Built in the mid-19th century by some nobleman whose name I forget, because he immediately went bankrupt and the property was bought by Josiah Shotton, George's father, 1860, I think, or thereabouts. The whole front of the building, whether Palladian or not, was thickly covered in ivy, which in some cases was growing right across the windows, which could only add to the dark and sinister atmosphere. I found it hard to imagine this as a family home, with children running around the gardens, horses being led to and fro, servants moving around, cheerful fires within, and all the hustle and bustle of late 19th century life. I squinted upwards. Shotton Hall was wider than it was tall, being only 3 stories high, excluding the attics. The square central block was flanked by 2 smaller, 1-story wings, with arched windows currently all boarded up. The front door, however, was clearly visible in a small porch between pillars supporting a portico. Tall brick chimneys sprouted from the roof, and small trees sprouted from the chimneys. We pulled up alongside a vast, over-egged SUV that had almost certainly never been off-road in its entire life. All that was missing was the cow catcher. Set in about 10 acres, said Jones chattily, climbing out of the car. All equally decrepit, I expect. I was looking around. There had been no reported sightings of the ghost for decades. On the other hand, no one lived here for a very long time, so perhaps the other Elizabeth couldn't be bothered to get out of bed if there was no one to be terrorised. I climbed slowly out of the car. The afternoon was hot and still. There was no sound, no leaves fluttered in the breeze, no birds sang, no fluffy clouds scudded across the sky. Time not only ran slowly here, it had practically stopped. The only sound was the faint tick-tick from the car as the engine cooled. It was, as they say in all the best films, too quiet. Cage? I closed the door very quietly, unwilling to draw attention to our arrival. Cage, said Jones again. Yes? You're right. So far so good, I said with fake cheeriness, and followed him through the knee-high weeds and brambles to the front door. Yes, he said, 2.5 minutes into the job and we're still unharmed. Must be a bit of a record for us. He scanned the front door for a knocker or bell, or anything to announce our arrival, and finding nothing, thumped on the door. I stood behind him, scanning the wilderness around us. It was so quiet I could hear my own breathing. Poor sightlines from the house, said Jones. An entire army could be concealed out there, and we'd never know anything about it until it was too late and our bodies were stretched lifeless across the porch. I always think it's your light-hearted insouciance that puts the sparkle into our working day. Believe it or not, Cage, I was a cheery chappie until I met you. All my girlfriends remarked on it. Some in a complimentary manner, but it has to be said, sometimes not. These last 2 years have worn me to a shadow of my former self, however, and I have no hesitation in blaming you for that. Have they forgotten we're coming, do you think? At that moment, the front door creaked open in the traditionally sinister manner. Both Jones and I refrained from comment. I disliked both the Shotton brothers as soon as I saw them, and then, as if things weren't bad enough, Lorelei King appeared from a doorway downstairs, and I knew that whatever was going to happen, none of it would be good. "Hello there," said the taller of the 2 men. He made ushering gestures. Come in, come in." He seemed in a great hurry to get us inside and shut the door behind us. I didn't much care for the emphatic way he shot the recently oiled bolts either. Turning to face us, he held out a hand. "I'm Oliver Shotton of Shotton Hall. Thank you for coming today." Jones, who has his own instincts, ignored the outstretched hand. Michael Jones, and this is Mrs. Cage. Mrs. Cage, what a pleasure to meet you. Lorelei, you remember her, I'm sure, has told me so much about you. There was something wrong, but I couldn't quite put my finger on it. Given the number of people who died here, I'd half expected the house to be full of sinister shades, all shrieking curses and demanding blood and retribution. But this house was as silent in as out. I closed my eyes and tried to let my mind drift a little, but Oliver just wouldn't stop talking and I couldn't concentrate. And this is Adam, my younger brother, and a junior partner in my little venture. I think I disliked Adam even more than Oliver. I made a mental note for the future: meet the clients face to face before we actually committed ourselves. I surfaced to find everyone looking at me. I'm sorry, I was miles away. Jolly good, said Oliver, rubbing his hands together. On the job already, I see. I wondered what would happen if I instructed Jones to inflict a little, very gentle violence on this prat, prior to us returning to Rushford with all speed. However, we were supposed to be professionals, and we were charging them the earth, so we needed to do this properly. The two brothers were standing close together. There was a strong family resemblance between them both, except that Adam was a weaker, paler copy of his brother. Oliver was tall, with light-coloured hair brushed back from a high forehead. He wore carefully casual country clothes that looked as if they were having their first outing, and his boots were very shiny and stiff-looking. Adam, on the other hand, hadn't bothered trying to fit in at all. He wore city clothes, but as a concession to the country living, however, he'd taken off his jacket and loosened his tie. His hair was darker and thinner than his brother's. The distance between his eyebrows and hairline was already greater than Oliver's. There was a faint smell of whiskey about him. His colour flopped helplessly around him, indecisive and vague. Oliver's deep purple colour was unusual, alternately bright and glowing with excitement, or possibly greed, and then withdrawn and tight. A man with something to hide was hardly a wild guess on my part. Adam's colour was a much weaker blue lavender and didn't glow at all, didn't do much of anything really. I wondered if he was on drugs, some sort of sedative perhaps. He definitely seemed a little out of things. Unusually for brothers, their colours were entirely separate. There was no mixing or mingling of any kind. These two didn't like each other very much. Lorelei King stood off to one side. Her green colour had darkened and was close and still. Orange curdled around the edges. She wasn't very happy about something. Oliver was still talking. Like to make a start, he was saying. It might be a good idea if I came with you. Some of the floors are a little spongy, you know. Or I could give you a potted history of the family, although I'm certain if you hadn't heard of us before, you certainly had after you Googled us. He crinkled his eyes in what he probably thought was a charmingly deprecating manner. Not a particularly nice bunch, are we? Receiving no polite denial, he pushed on. Anyway, this place has been empty forever. Adam stirred. Sorry, Adam, we're actually the first Shottons to set foot in Shotton Hall for more than a decade. Why are you here now? Inquired Jones, looking around. Personally, I mean, you could have engaged an agent to meet us here. To satisfy my own curiosity, I suppose. My father never came near the place, not after my brother died here, more than 10 years ago. I was the second son. Never thought Shotton Hall would be mine. He looked around. But my father died, and now it is. His colour said that wasn't quite right. He wasn't lying, but he wasn't telling the truth either. Not the whole truth, anyway. He was holding something back. We have great plans for this place, Oliver gestured around. Convert this main building into flats. We're looking at 6 luxury apartments in the main body of the house, plus another 2 super luxury affairs, one in each wing. Adam's colour was flooding through with what? Resentment? Greed? No, fear. Oliver was still talking. There'll be a spa, of course, a well-equipped gym and heated indoor swimming pool, plus another 20 or so houses built in the grounds, each set in its own half-acre garden. Yes, we're really going to clean up on this one. Does your planning application include some affordable housing? Inquired James, who had done our homework. Oliver shrugged. Well, yes, but we'll fling up half a dozen hovels round the back when no one can see them. Separate entrance, big hedge and everything. Just one of the ways to keep the council off our backs. Apart from the traditional method, of course. He jingled the coins in his pocket and laughed at, look how clever I am, laugh. No one else even smiled. So, said Jones, just so we're all on the same page, this house's reputation is standing in the way of what is obviously going to be a sizable profit. And you want Mrs. Cage to confirm? No, I said slowly. That's not quite right, is it? The atmosphere changed. Oliver's colour contracted sharply and deepened to almost black. Well, actually, no. I must admit to a very slight, withholding of one fact. The atmosphere changed again. From the corner of my eye, I saw Adam and Lorelei move closer together as if for mutual support. From the way their colours mingled, I guess they were a couple. And I think about that later because something was definitely going on here. Jones also moved slightly. I recognised the stance. Weight on both feet, hands loose at his sides, ready for anything. I moved behind him because that was what he always said. Stay behind me so I know where you are, Cage, and don't get in my way. I half turned to check behind us. We were still in the generously proportioned entrance hall, no more than 10 paces from the front door. Neither Oliver nor Adam would give Jones any trouble at all, and, I'm ashamed to say, if I was very lucky, an opportunity might arise to give Lorelei King the slapping she so deserved. Let's get this straight, said Jones. You want us to establish whether or not you have a ghost. Oh no. We know the answer to that question. We do have a ghost. Elizabeth shot him. So what exactly is the problem? Has she started to walk again? She never stopped. She's here right now. He was right. Something was coming. Oliver's colour was brightening again. He was almost gleeful. I wondered if he enjoyed frightening people. I turned my head to look at Lorelei. Her colour was almost vibrating. Thick ropes of orange ran through it. I moved to face Oliver Shotton. Why exactly have you brought me here? I want you to send the ghost away. Mrs. Cage is not a performing seal, said Jones angrily. Why now? I asked, turning my head, trying to focus. My heart rate was increasing. I could hear the beat inside my head. Have people started to die? Not yet. I don't understand. And we don't want to, said Jones. I don't like the look of any of these dodgy buggers, Cage. Let's go. He began to head for the door. I'm afraid, said Oliver, stepping into his path, that opening the door is out of the question. You see, unfortunately for all of us, there's one rather important piece of information that isn't generally known. I wasn't completely sure of it myself until it was too late. And what's that? I asked, although I was horribly sure I guessed the answer. Oliver's colour surged around him. Elizabeth Shotton. She lets people in, but she never lets them back out again. You say Mrs. Cage is not a performing seal, but if she ever wants to see the outside world again, then, I'm afraid, perform she must. I think, is a scene one or two of you have commented on in the past. It's from About Time, Saving Time. And two of your favourite characters are about to go on a date.
Oh God, no pressure then. Right then. Here we go. I'm not quite sitting comfortably, but I am now. Okay. Oh, that's quite hard. I see why you've got your little lights there.
Do you want them?
No, you're all right. Right, here we go. A washed and burnished Lieutenant Grint had arrived nearly 10 minutes early and had spent the greater part of that time pacing the atrium, oblivious to the grins and nudges of his on-duty colleagues. At exactly 19:55 hours, the lift doors opened, and with some relief, he saw Jane walking towards him. The same relief was felt by Jane when the lift doors opened and she saw Lieutenant Grint standing exactly where he should be. Grint smiled. Hello. He stopped, unsure how to proceed. What did he call her? Lachlan seemed wrong. Jane seemed not quite right. He dealt with the problem by not calling her anything at all. Hello, said Jane, prey to exactly the same indecision. Sir seemed too formal. Lieutenant seemed not quite right. Gordon was unthinkable. She decided she wouldn't call him anything at all. Shall we go? He said, and she nodded. They walked slowly along the embankment towards the Flying Duck public house, which, rumour had it, had been there longer than TPHQ itself. The evening was quite chilly. Jane was well wrapped up in her smart coat and pashmina. Grint remembered his list of things to say and the order in which to say them. You look very nice. Thank you, said Jane, wondering how on earth to reciprocate. Grint out of uniform looked very similar to Grint in his uniform. They turned left, away from the river. The restaurant was a little further down the road, just opposite Battersea Park. I've been here before, said Jane, to break the silence. We had a team meal here after we qualified. Yes, said Grint. With mounting panic, Jane realised her repertoire of small talk was now completely exhausted, and they hadn't even sat down yet. The restaurant was warm inside. Delicious smells wafted their way. The red and white gingham tablecloths reminded Jane a little of the kitchen in Walthamstow, but other than that, everything was quiet and comfortable. Their waiter was very young, a student, possibly. Grint glowered at the wastrel. Until this moment, Jane hadn't given much thought to her personal appearance, or rather, she'd lingered over her choice of attire and been careful with her hair, but she had entirely forgotten her face. Her bruises were at the yellow and brown stage, not nearly as spectacular as the purple and red of last week, but certainly eye-catching. All conversation in the restaurant ceased. Everyone looked at Jane. Then, as if on a string, all eyes swiveled to Grint. Their waiter, about to show them to their table, paused. I have a table booked, said Grint, seemingly unaware. All eyes swiveled back to Jane. Oh, said Jane, suddenly comprehending and touching her face. No, it wasn't him. Realisation hit Grint harder than an unexpected tax bill. He swiveled, swelled with indignation, not a particularly reassuring sight to those at near tables. Their waiter ushered them to a quiet table in the corner, mostly obscured from public view. Only half the tables were occupied at this early hour. Jane was almost certain this hadn't been their original table, but it was now. Still, at least they weren't next to the toilets. The waiter hovered, awaiting their drinks order. Jane was still fairly unaccustomed to drink wine in the evening, or indeed at any hour, but she hoped a glass would help her get through what promised to be an even more awkward than anticipated evening. I shouldn't have come, she thought, smiling timidly at the unsmiling Grint across the table. Grint also was in unfamiliar territory. He was aware of the existence of wine. Girls drank it. He himself was a beer man, but Jane, obviously more sophisticated than he had given her credit for, was drinking wine, therefore so should he. Perhaps a nice glass or two would help him get through the evening. He took surreptitious stock of his surroundings. Main entrance to his right, about 20 feet away. 2 empty tables between him and any hostilities erupting through the door. Toilet, door to his left, unisex by the looks of it. He'd check it for windows and other methods of clandestine entry at the first opportunity. Kitchen door, also to his left, full of civilians with knives. Stay alert. Approximately 10 people in the room, excluding staff, average age around 40. No one appeared to be armed, 2 waitresses, 1 waiter, average age 12. Students, all of them. In the event of any trouble, take them out first. Having performed his risk assessment, he became aware of the silence. More conversation was obviously called for. Comment positively on the surroundings. "This is very nice," he said, looking around. Jane nodded. "Have you been here before?" "No, this is my first visit. I hear good reports, though." More silence fell. Grint was conscious of unease. This was not going well. Under cover of the table, he surreptitiously consulted his list and selected a subject more or less at random. Without looking up, and much more loudly than he had intended, he demanded, "Do you like kittens?" The waiter, who had chosen that moment to lean across Jane to fill her water glass, was rather startled to be included in this bizarre couple's conversation and was slightly thrown. "Oh, yes," he said. "Do you?" Jane concentrated hard on the checked tablecloth. Grint stared across the room. The waiter withdrew, advised his 2 colleagues to keep an eye on table 3, and began to gird himself for a return trip with the menus. Sorry, I made a list of things to talk about," mumbled Grint, "and a timetable." "What an excellent idea," said Jane swiftly, forgetting her own embarrassment in her efforts to ease his. "I wish I'd thought to do the same. I do like to plan ahead, don't you? If that's what you were doing under the table, then you can take it out. I really don't mind." The waiter, arriving at the tail end of that exchange, and considerably intrigued as to what they could possibly be talking about, presented the menus as slowly as he could manage. Grint rummaged subterraneously for a few moments, eventually producing a much crumpled piece of paper. The waiter sighed slightly. A disappointed man. "So," said Jane, sipping her wine for courage and comfort, "what's next on the list?" "Books," said Grint, very aware he wouldn't be doing the heavy lifting with this one. Unless Jane was also a subscriber to Bombs and Blasters, of course. He cleared his throat. "What are you reading at the moment?" "Well, at the moment I'm reading Wuthering Heights for about the 12th time," said Jane, slightly conscious of letting the side down and considering it unlikely Grint was familiar with Emily Bronte's classic work. It was to be an evening of surprises for both of them. Grint frowned. "Is that the one where everyone lives in the kitchen and shouts at each other across the moors?" Yes, that's it. Have you read it too?" Even the waiter looked impressed. "Did it at school," Grint said quickly, before anyone could begin to suspect him of unnecessary literacy. "Everyone hates everyone, right? I don't know why they don't just call it a day and come out of the rain." "I never thought of that," said Jane, fascinated by this fresh insight. "And," he said, warming to his theme, "I'd have caved in Heathcliff's head with a saucepan, chucked his body in a bog and claimed he'd gone off on his travels again, wouldn't you?" Well, I hadn't actually considered it until this moment, but now you come to mention it, what a good idea. Grint nodded. Would have been a shorter book too. It was obvious this would have been a powerful point in the book's favour. The waiter considered coughing gently to indicate he was awaiting their order and decided against it. Jane was thoughtful. Wouldn't the bog have preserved his body though? It does, you know. They're always finding prehistoric people in bogs, and it could have floated to the surface at any time. I don't think a bog is necessarily the best place to hide the person you just murdered.
What about setting fire to it?
Suggested Grint.
I'll have a steak, please. Rare.
I don't think it would ever have stopped raining long enough for them to get a good fire going. Quicklime, perhaps? Tuna for me, please. The waiter nodded. Actually, in some circumstances, quicklime can actually preserve the body. They looked at him.
Reading chemistry at uni.
He gestured around him.
Student loans. You'd be better off with Lyre. If you can heat it, a Lyre solution can liquefy a body in about 3 hours. Job done. Useful.
Said Grint, tucking this little tidbit away for future reference. The waiter departed. What a nice boy, said Jane. Grint, who hadn't noticed, nodded. Well, said Jane, now that we've gruesomely murdered one of the most romantic heroes of his age and learned something in the process, what's next on your list? Grint smoothed the paper.
Pets.
Never had one, said Jane sadly. You?
I had a cat when I was a kid,
said Grint.
My mum was frightened of dogs.
Oh, said Jane, suddenly realising she had learned 2 things about Grint in one sentence. 3, if you included the fact he'd actually had a mother. What was his name?
Claude,
said Grint, and spelled it out for her in case she hadn't got the joke. Clever, said Grint. And did he? Claw, I mean?
Yes, she was a big, fat, lazy thing. She'd sleep on my face at night and I'd have nightmares and wake up thinking I was suffocating.
Okay, said Jane. Grint was conscious of some alarm. They seemed to have covered pets in just half a minute. His list wasn't going to last long at this rate. Fortunately, Jane had more to say on the subject. I wish I'd had a pet when I was young. The nearest I ever had was a taxidermied seagull. It used to terrify me.
Said Grint. Surely it was, dead. Wasn't it?
Oh, yes, said Jane quickly. I know that now, but it was in a glass case, and every time I passed it, I was convinced it was watching me, and my gran used to say if I wasn't good, then she'd send it to my bedroom at night to bite me while I slept. Sometimes I would get up in the middle of the night and stand on the stairs, just to check it was still there. In its case, I mean. She laughed nervously. It always was.
Right,
said Grint, who had always felt that the rules and regs pertaining to the shooting of civilians, whether such actions were necessary or not, were a considerable hindrance to him in the conscientious execution of his duties. But that's how I came to join the Time Police. I dropped it. The seagull, I mean, and its head came off.
Yes,
said Grint cautiously, not seeing the connection. Oh, I was so scared that I ran away to join the Time Police. He was still thinking that one over when Jane explained what was next on the list. Fashion, he said gloomily. Their food arrived. Jane picked up her napkin and grinned at him. Off you go then. He surveyed her outfit.
I see black is very fashionable this year.
Emboldened by the arrival of her excellent food, Jane decided he could probably handle a little gentle mockery. Nice try, but black is fashionable every year. She gestured at his own clothes. Both of them had stuck to a colour they were comfortable in.
Well, it doesn't show the dirt.
He said, looking down at himself. All tomato sauce. That's why I went for the tuna. Grint panicked.
Don't you like pasta? Do you want to go somewhere else? Only someone said this place is very good.
About to lay Grint's steak in front of him, the waiter paused, looking from one to the other. Jane made haste to reassure everyone. Oh, it is. It's just, well, you promise you won't laugh? Grint, never famed for spontaneous merriment,
Solemnly promised he wouldn't laugh.
Well, I'm just such a messy eater, especially spaghetti. The sauce goes everywhere. You should be grateful. You could be going back to HQ covered from head to foot in tomato sauce. That's why I'm having the tuna.
Grint beamed at her.
That's why I'm having a steak. For exactly the same reason.
The waiter heaved an audible sigh of relief, plonked down Grint's steak, and, unable to think of a reason to remain, departed. Jane nodded. Very wise. You can't go wrong with steak. There was a pause. Grint racked his brains.
So, how are you feeling now?
He balked again at referring to her by name, rank, or gender. Still best not to call her anything at all.
Are you almost recovered?
Yes, thank you. My bruises have nearly faded. I'm still a little stiff and I can't walk very quickly, as you saw on the way here, but I'm back to full duties next week. There was another pause. This is very nice, said Jane, looking around. Do you come here often? And could have kicked herself. Grint shook his head.
Don't go out much.
The words, and never with a date, hung in the air.
I mean,
He continued, cutting into his steak.
I'm usually busy. You know, there's a lot on these days, and if I want a bit of company, I go to the bar or, you know.
Jane watched him eat, seemingly completely unaware those few sentences had revealed a whole sad world of solitary loneliness. Well, this is very pleasant, she said. I'm so glad you asked me, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the dessert menu. I mean, the food at TPHQ is fine, but they don't really do desserts, do they? Not properly, I mean.
I suspect, said Grint, that most time police officers find the thought of anything with whipped cream to be slightly effeminate.
Jane laughed. Grint, who'd never made a female laugh before, well, not for the right reasons anyway, looked up in surprise. She smiled at him. He smiled back. The rest of the meal went quite well. Their waiter was attentive, and in a moment of giddy recklessness by all parties, more wine was poured. They even ordered dessert. With lots of cream, said Jane firmly, and then coffee. Their meal was over. The waiter appeared with the bill and hesitated between them. Thank you, said Grint. Jane opened her mouth to say she'd pay for herself. The waiter, standing strategically behind Grint's chair, caught her eye and shook his head slightly. Well, said Jane, that was the nicest meal I've had for a long time. Thank you very much. I'll leave the tip, if you like. I think our waiter deserves a good one, because now we know how to dispose of a body quickly and cleanly, and you never know when that sort of knowledge will come in useful. A moment later, they were outside in the cold night air. They walked slowly back along the river, mostly in silence, but not awkwardly so. Grint and Jane's date was the hot topic of the day. Speculation as to how things had gone was rife and imaginative, permitting every level of the time police. Even Commander Hay and Captain Farrington were not immune. So, said Hay, sitting back in her chair and sipping her coffee the next morning, Grint and Lockland. Astonishing, Ma'am, yes. Do we know how it went? Well, I do, Ma'am. There was a pause. Are you going to make your commanding officer beg? My duty is, as always, to clear away any obstacles and smooth the path of my commanding officer's working day. Then don't just sit there, Charlie. Smooth. My sources inform me Lieutenant Grint and Officer Lockland walked to the Italian restaurant round the corner, the one next to the Flying Duck. He had the steak, she had the fish. There was a certain amount of initial blushing and awkwardness, but contrary to expectations, they managed to converse pleasantly throughout the meal. After their meal, for which Lieutenant Grint paid, they took a short walk along the embankment. Returning to TPHQ, they parted on Officer Lockland's floor, and a tentative second date was mooted. Commander Hay regarded her adjutant with unbridled admiration. Outstanding intern, Charlie, even for you. I accept your praise with becoming modesty, Ma'am. So basically, no one died. No, Ma'am. At no point did Lieutenant Grint discharge his weapon. No, but I don't believe he had found it necessary to arm himself for the occasion. A successful evening, then? Captain Farrington blinked. What, Charlie? Well, nothing, Ma'am. It's just that I couldn't help reflecting that your criteria for a successful romantic rendezvous seems to be that no weapons were discharged and no one died. Anything wrong with that? Absolutely not, Ma'am.